When I hear politics, I sort of think of different groups trying to prove to others that they're better than one another just to get to the top.
Honest opinion, grumpy old men, white middle class, if not upper class, politicians on a big high wage, out of touch with the community they're supposedly representing. Although I kind of ignore, well not ignore, but I kind of forget about the good work some politicians are doing.
Well, actually, I think Nigel, is it, in UKIP, because of the Big Trouble and everything that he created. That's just what I think when it comes to politics, to be honest.
Fairly rich politicians in suits, trying to represent maybe the views of people when they don't necessarily know the views of the people.
Know anything about politics. If I think about politics, I think debates. There's a lot of debates in politics in there. I wouldn't say I'm very interested. I think as a young person, not a lot of young people are interested or know a lot about how to get involved in politics.
I think we've known for quite a long time from existing literature actually that young people are increasingly withdrawing from, not engaging with formal politics, so traditional forms of political participation, and that's not something that this survey perhaps unfortunately has disproved.
What we have done in this research is to look at that in a much more holistic way than any other research has ever done, by looking at it in the totality of people's experience, their attitudes not just to politics and their involvement in politics, but also their social attitudes and their social identities, their understanding of history. That gives, if you're a much more nuanced and multi-layered approach.
And I think that's why this kind of holistic approach that we've adopted in MyPlace kind of helps to to unpack some of those kind of complexities, rather than just seeing it kind of quite neatly as, oh, this is a kind of a resistance to young people who engage in a politics of fun rather than traditional forms. I think it's more complicated than that.
I think the kind of disconnect is with kind of institutions and in terms of politicians, and particularly around their kind of trusting politicians as well. I think the survey showed that young people don't trust politicians, and to a certain extent young people don't feel that politicians understand them.
The language of politics itself is off-putting. People feel that they don't understand it and they can't engage with it. Having said that, it's not a trend that's exclusive to youth, so there's not a particular problem about youth apathy, although the tendency is more exaggerated amongst young people than amongst the general population.
I think our voices are very much drowned by those that are at the top and I guess are born into politics in a way.
I am elected with people who are sometimes 50 years older than me, sometimes 40 years older than me. In terms of age, it's very much, how can you know anything? Like, I was on a committee for 4 years when you were being born, kind of thing, so what do you know?
They see the institutions as being far away from them, both geographically and in terms of what institutions do and achieve. They just don't see politicians and political institutions as working in their interests or being interested in them as a part of the voting population.
A politician's going to be like, why the hell will I want to listen to them? Why would I want to put stuff that they want in my manifesto when I'm not going to be getting their votes? I want to get votes from elderly people, like people that actually do vote in large numbers, or like groups that do vote in large numbers.
59%. That's the proportion of young people who may not cast their vote at the general election in a year's time. And when it comes to this month's Euro elections, 2/3 may vote with their feet. Still, some campaigners say that the 2 million young people refusing to vote should not heed the words of Russell Brand if they want to make a difference to their country.
Because I know so many young people that are the age to vote and they just won't because, you know, they just say, you know, the politicians, they don't know how we live, they don't know what life is like, and so why would I vote for them?
I'm not saying that the apathy doesn't come from us, the people. The apathy comes from the politicians. They are apathetic to our needs. They're only interested in servicing the needs of corporations.
And they give clear messages to politicians that they are failing young people. They are failing young people substantively in terms of what the political system is delivering to them. And they are failing young people, or perceived to be failing young people, in terms of reaching out to them and showing that politics matters. And giving and equipping them to actually participate politically.
Do young people perceive that politicians at local, national, international, I'm including parish councillors here, are they handing rights and responsibilities to young people for young people to take part and to persuade and bring about change? And I would say possibly not.
A lot of the media attention does focus on the idea it's their problem, they don't vote, whereas our evidence suggests that actually it's institutionalised. Young people's disengagement is not just something autonomously chosen by them, it's something generated by the way that politics works in our country.
Well, I think it's an appalling situation that we find because young people aren't represented. We've got to give them more voice. It's no good us telling young people what's needed. Young people have got to tell us what to do, and to do that we've got to, you know, have mechanisms in place, you know, to allow them to do it. But until we get that done, I'm afraid, you know, sort of the voting patterns as they're being shown, you know, we're doomed.
Until 1992, over 60% of 18 to 24-year-olds were voting in general elections. By 2010, that had dropped to 44%. Latest polling suggests that only 24%, less than 1 in 4, are certain to vote at the next general election, and that means that we're in trouble.
I didn't vote. I counted the votes for like the local elections and the European elections, but I've never voted myself, so I don't really know enough to make an educated vote. It'd just be me going, oh, I like red, I'll vote Labour. It wouldn't really be, oh no, I don't even know if they're the right way around. Is Labour red? Oh yes. But yeah, I don't really know much about it. I don't think I know enough to make the vote count, really. But, yeah.
Young people in the UK have a much greater tendency to talk about this disconnect in terms of class.
This is what I noticed when I was in that Houses of Parliament. It's decorated exactly the same as Eton. It's decorated exactly the same as Oxford. So a certain type of people goes in there and thinks, oh, this makes me nervous. And another type of people go in there and go, this is how it should be.
People that are saying that they'll protect vulnerable people are the people that I would vote for.
Strong view that politicians favour those that are wealthy in society and are more privileged. And on the whole, young people don't include themselves in that group as well.
In reality, I think they have their own interests. I think there's a lot of lobbying, definitely with private companies with obviously a lot of money, and I think there's definitely a lot of bribery in politics.
It's about trade union fixing of political appointments to this House.
The Conservative Party has received £25 million from a hedge fund.
Over half of our young people said that they felt that politicians were corrupt.
MP Hazel Blears has said she's sorry for the outrage she's caused in her Salford constituency by avoiding tax on the sale of a property in London.
About 3/4 of young people actually stated that they feel like the rich have too much influence over politics.
And I think that tells you something about the perception of who does politics.
It's very skewed, and I think it only works for the people at the top, and I think the people at the bottom and even in the middle have no say whatsoever. I think it's very, what's the word, elitist.
I think the political system is completely and utterly designed, not by coincidence, but on purpose, to alienate young people, to not only alienate young people, but to alienate working class young people.
I would love to be able to do something big in the future and make a difference or whatnot, but you know, the next Prime Minister is already going through Eton and private schools, and that's not me, and I'm not from that background with a private school. And
young people themselves recognise that there's a disconnect between them and political institutions and parties and politicians.
You know, you can vote when you're 18, but all they do then is they feed you so much rubbish in their manifestos that, you know, they want to get, obviously they want the votes from young people, so they tell you they're going to lower the uni fees and they're going to do this and do that, and they care about young people.
I believe it's time for promises to be kept.
And yet when they get into power, it's a whole different story.
There's no easy way to say this. We made a pledge, we didn't stick to it, and for that I am sorry. A trail of broken promises.
Generalising here, but you know, senior politicians at those levels, you know, and especially MPs, they're that quick to try and get the vote of young people and to try and sounds really bad, but use young people to make themselves look good.
I will never again make a pledge unless as a party we are absolutely clear about how we can keep it.
Some people fall for that, and you know, politicians are very good with words and they're very good at kind of doing the speeches and all that jazz. But I think for me, I just see it as rubbish.
What's really important to just remember is that you're not going to get people to vote, particularly young people to vote, if they don't think their vote is having an impact. Because why should someone make the effort to do something if there's no outcome? And I think that's really important to remember when we're labelling young people as being lazy or disconnected, or, you know, would you make an effort to do something if you knew there was no outcome? Most of us wouldn't.
The big issue that I think is whether or not you see success in terms of the number of young people who actually turn up to vote, aged between, say, 18 and 25, or trying to find out the number of young people who are politically active in some way across, say, the years of formal education, so from 5 to 18 or maybe 5 to 16.
I think the key thing is that young people are interested in political issues, but maybe not in the kind of mainstream politics. And it's how local and national politics can actually work for young people and address young people's issues and actually see young people as a resource to support them.
So schools play a huge part in, first of all, helping young people to understand that politics isn't just the boring stuff that they sometimes see on the television. Politics is all around them. It impacts on them every day. So helping them to understand how that happens.
No, I don't think they get any education. I remember PSHE in year 8, and they told us about the 5 main political parties. They just gave us they didn't even tell us, they just gave us a leaflet, had a good read, and then that was it. That was all the education we got. We never got told how to register, how to vote, why it's important to vote, and I think it's important to have lessons like that. And I think that might be on purpose, because I don't think politicians want more people to vote, because they quite like the groups of people they have at the moment. So, we'll just please them, we'll get their vote, you know, the 60% of the people that are eligible to vote do vote, and we'll get their vote, and that's the end of the day. Our job's a lot easier because there's so many safe seats.
Worse still, politicians aren't going to do anything about it. Now, this is a bit more contentious. Am I really claiming that politicians don't want something that is essential to our democracy? Yes, I am. I think they're happy with things as they are. Why? Because politicians fundamentally chase votes, and the young are expected not to vote, so no one's chasing them. The government looks after the people that have elected it, old people. So we're kind of living, you could argue, in a sort of gerontocracy where the youngest get hit the hardest. So from broken promises on tuition fees to plans to cut out-of-work benefits for under 25s, to the scrapping of the education maintenance allowance. The list goes on and on and on.
You need to have room for student voice at school. Young people need to be given more of an opportunity to voice their opinion formally and informally within their communities. And that takes time and money and thought and collaboration between adults and young people to actually bring that about.
You know, I'm interested in kind of politics or whatever, but I've never really taken much of a love for it. So I kind of do what I do because I enjoy it, and I think that, you know, it's important to have your opinion heard.
If you're looking at politics with a smaller p, in other words, you're looking at what happens in their local communities and what happens immediately in their neighbourhoods, then they are interested.
We need an education system that is concise and to the point, so young people know how to use the skills that they're going to learn today.
What young person does not have a cause that they are passionate about? It may be something they dip in and out of, but in order to turn that passion into change action, in order to turn that passion into a commitment, they need the language of politics. So that is about negotiation. It's understanding rights and responsibilities. It's understanding the difference between success and failure and how to be advocates and representatives for themselves and others.
I think most of it is, it's not really in not taking an interest. I think it's not knowing a lot about it to know that they could take an interest if they wanted to.
Maybe we need not to talk about politics, but like social action and getting what you deserve and that kind of stuff, because politics is a toxic word.
You know, one of the things that we're finding from the project is that we may not be seeing an actual disconnect from politics, but a performative or declarative disavowal of the political system, and that's a very, very different thing. It means that young people can still be reached, can still be engaged, have things to say and to commit to the existing political system. It's just that they're not being reached at the moment.
A question was asked around are politicians interested in young people like me?
The overwhelming feeling was that politicians are not interested in them. They came out with things like, you know, they always come around here at election time and try to talk to us because they want our vote. But at any other time, you won't see any politician around here in our neighbourhood asking us what we think, what issues we're concerned with, what kind of changes we want to see in our society.
You know, as much as we're told we're the next generation and we're the future and all this, I think that they don't really listen. I don't think that they really care, to be honest.
Yeah, there's not enough, they don't talk to young people enough, I don't think, and get their views, and I don't think enough young people know how to go out their way themselves to get their voices heard. So it just sort of sits in that just leave it alone area.
I think they're represented very badly, and that is partly because levels of voting amongst young people are very low, and it's because that, you know, we've not succeeded yet in inventing good ways to get young people involved.
If a young person had the opportunity, I think they would like to, but I don't think everyone would know how to get involved. And as soon as you get a way in, then of course it actually becomes a lot more interesting. But it's finding that way in. I think a lot of young people might want to, or might not know a lot about it, so might not actually know that they want to get involved.
I think young people, we're not quite there in helping young people get their voices heard and get them recognised to the same level as adults do.
People kind of could potentially speak to us as a tick box and, you know, to say we've talked to young people and we've got their opinion, and sometimes it feels as though they do that after they've made a decision. So it's kind of just to say that they've done it. So it's sometimes hard to know whether your opinion is, you know, actually being valued, but I think that unless you actually try, then, you know, there's no hope.
And I think definitely there needs to be change in the country itself before young people can get involved.
There's a sense that what politicians do is sit around debating with other parties and not getting on with the real business. So they've kind of talked past the real issues that young people feel are important.
Politics was really, really normal in my household. Having said that, it doesn't mean that I have not been completely scared and alienated from the political process and left out, and I have definitely noticed, if I think about my father and his involvement in politics compared to mine, I have many more barriers that he didn't have.
There's not a lot of places that young people can go to say what they want to say, and there's it's quite hard to get in contact with people that they want to get in contact with to debate things that they feel that needs to be changed.
I think they should have a voice in everything that goes on, because they're going to be the future adults, so they know what they want now, and that might fit into what adults right now want as well, because I think we see the world in a different way to what older people see it. So it would be good for us to be able to make an impact and say our voices than just having us just talk about parks.
Because I think sometimes adults can make a lot of decisions without actually taking into consideration what young people think, and I think adults sometimes they have to listen, and they can't ignore us in some ways.
We as adults and politicians and anyone who's in a position of perceived power, if you like the media, it's our responsibility to listen. It's not a young person, a 16-year-old's responsibility to convince us that they're interested in politics.
Our problem is connecting with people at large of almost any age. And I visit schools and universities and all the rest of it. I enjoy talking to young people. But I like to provoke them as well. And I like to say to them, I can't even talk to your parents, right? As a politician, as an elected politician, I can't speak to your parents. If I put a leaflet through their door, they will put it in the bin, they will not read it. If I call a meeting, they won't come. Yeah? If I knock on the door, invariably they're out, and they don't really want to talk to me in any case. And if I try to ring them up, they've either got rid of the landline and they're on mobiles, or they've gone ex-directory.
Okay, so where do they get their political information from? A lot of them get their information from social media. A lot of them get it from the news feed bits of Facebook, for example.
You talk to the population through the media, and you have to do almost everything through that membrane of the media. And the media is pretty cynical, self-serving, and often very, very destructive.
I find that teaching at the FE college, a lot of them don't actually make the connection between media and politics, and don't understand how entrenched the UK media is with political parties. And obviously that causes a problem when they're taking in information and sharing information, that they'll share on Facebook, on Twitter and different social channels. They don't understand a lot of the time the political bias.
So politicians become defensive because they know that one word will be taken out of context and used to suggest that they're idiots. So you become very defensive, and therefore your ability to communicate is restricted and restricted and restricted.
So yes, I think there are obstacles for politicians, but instead of worrying about how those things are obstacles for politicians, they need to go out and find out, well, where are the people you're trying to reach? Where are they? Because stop trying to communicate on the platforms where those people aren't. Go and find out where they are and listen first.
What I try to do is try and engage with residents through use of social media. I also encourage residents to follow me on Twitter, which is @JohnABlundell. I've got just over 1,000 followers now. And often I'm listening to the radio in the morning and there'll be something controversial come up and I will tweet my position.
You should be using social media to listen to the public and to listen to what they want.
They want to be heard, and I think it's important to recognise that while there are these tendencies, people will say radical things about anti-democratic forms of government and so on, they continue to seek to be heard. But they don't feel they're being listened to, even when they make that effort to try and be heard through the existing political system. So I think the message is to listen.
I think, politicians need to think about young people when they make their decisions and kind of listen to us and actually listen to us instead of just using us as a tick box and to say they have. I think that there's so many incredible opinions that so many young people hold, and, you know, you've just got to kind of give them that opportunity.
But number one, listen. Number two, ask questions and get into conversations. And number three, use it as a way to meet more people and use it as a way to drive more people to real life discussions and to real life events and things like that are happening anyway.
So it's about trying to inspire young people to really believe in what they do know and use that as capital, to use that as say, hang on, this happened to me last week and you couldn't possibly know that. You haven't walked down a street in a hoodie and been stopped by the police, and that's a political issue. To use that as capital and know that that's valuable, but also for those receiving it to know that that's valuable and not just some anecdotal rubbish from a young person or a woman.
I think we should have more representation in House of Commons. I think we should have, the three major parties should encourage to have more young politicians out there.
It's not more than 5 years ago, or maybe 6 years ago, that there was resistance in the Houses of Parliament to young people holding the UK Youth Parliament in that building, which to me seems completely mad. You know, parliamentarians should have been, House of Commons and Lords, saying this is what we need. We need young people in here. We need to break down the physical walls that there are between this institution and young people.
I think young people should vote locally and nationally because they're the next generation and there's people in power that are having a say about your life and what's going to happen and what isn't. So I think they should.
I'm saying if you
Brilliant.
can't be asked to vote, why should we be asked to listen to your political point of view?
You don't have to listen to my political point of view, but it's not that I'm not voting out of apathy. I'm not voting out of absolute indifference and weariness and exhaustion from the lies, treachery, deceit of the political class that has been going on for generations now, and which has now reached fever pitch where we have a disenfranchised, disillusioned, despondent underclass that are not being represented by that political system. So voting for it is tacit complicity with that system, and that's not something I'm offering up.
Democracy is not nearly as strong as it ought to be, and some of the fault for that belongs with politicians and political parties and their own credibility. But don't anybody ever get away from what I think is an age-old truism, and that is that you get the government that you deserve. And if you will not and do not engage, build and influence the institutions that effectively make up your democracy, you know, you've got a weak democracy. Or maybe sadly in some parts of the world, and we shouldn't believe that it could never happen here, you haven't even got a democracy at all.